I never thought I would find myself here, sitting alone in my apartment, staring at the empty space where her things used to be, wondering how 3 years of love could unravel so quickly, so completely, leaving me with nothing but questions and a heart that feels too heavy to carry. My name is Jordan, and this is the story of how I lost Sarah, not to another woman, not to distance or time, but to the ghost of her past that she could never quite let go of, no matter how hard we both tried to build something new together. We met at a coffee shop in Denver on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, one of those chance encounters that feels scripted by fate itself, where she accidentally knocked over my laptop bag while reaching for her order, and our eyes met in that moment of shared embarrassment that somehow turned into laughter. Sarah had this way of lighting up a room without even trying, her auburn hair catching the light just so, her smile genuine in a way that made you want to know every story she had to tell. She was working as a graphic designer at a small firm downtown, creating beautiful things for clients who rarely appreciated the thought and care she put into every project, and I was teaching history at the local community college, trying to make the past come alive for students who were mostly just trying to get their credits and move on. Our first real conversation lasted 4 hours, the coffee shop closing around us as we talked about everything and nothing, from our favorite books to our biggest fears, from childhood memories to dreams we hadn't shared with anyone else. She told me she had moved to Denver 6 months earlier, starting fresh after a difficult breakup, though she didn't go into details that first day, just mentioned it in passing like a weather report, something that had happened but was now in the past. I remember being struck by her honesty, the way she didn't try to hide that she had been hurt, but also didn't let it define our conversation or cast a shadow over the possibility of something new. Those early days were magical in the way that new love often is, filled with discoveries and surprises, late-night conversations that stretched until dawn, weekend adventures exploring the mountains around Denver, quiet mornings reading together in bed while the world outside continued its relentless pace. Sarah introduced me to her love of abstract art, taking me to galleries I would have walked past before, teaching me to see the emotion in colors and shapes I had previously dismissed as random. I shared with her my passion for forgotten stories from history, the people whose names never made it into textbooks, but whose lives shaped the world in small but significant ways. It was 3 months into our relationship when she first told me about Marcus, her ex, and the reality of what she had endured. We were cooking dinner together in her apartment, a simple pasta dish that had become our Thursday tradition, when something on the news triggered a memory she couldn't push down. Her hands started shaking as she chopped vegetables, and suddenly she was crying, apologizing through her tears for ruining our evening. I held her on the kitchen floor for an hour while she told me everything, how Marcus had started out charming and attentive, how slowly that attention had turned to control, how his words had become weapons designed to tear her down piece by piece. She told me about the verbal attacks that came out of nowhere, criticism disguised as concern, insults wrapped in jokes that weren't funny, constant accusations of cheating whenever she spoke to another man or came home 5 minutes late from work. She described how he would punch walls during arguments, his fist going through drywall inches from her head, how he would apologize afterward with flowers and promises that never lasted more than a week or two before the cycle started again. The emotional manipulation was perhaps the worst part, she said, the way he made her believe she was lucky to have him, that no one else would put up with her flaws, that she was too sensitive, too dramatic, too much of everything wrong and not enough of anything right. The physical abuse had been less frequent but more terrifying, she explained, her voice barely above a whisper as she recounted the times he had grabbed her too hard, leaving bruises she had to cover with makeup and long sleeves, the night he had pushed her down the stairs and then convinced her she had tripped, that her memory was playing tricks on her. She had stayed for 3 years, she said, partly out of fear, partly out of hope that he would change, but mostly because he had systematically destroyed her sense of self-worth until she couldn't imagine deserving anything better. But there was another reason she had stayed so long, one that made leaving even more complicated and painful. Marcus had a son from a previous relationship, a sweet boy named Tyler who was 4 when Sarah entered his life, and 7 when she finally found the courage to leave. She had become Tyler's primary caregiver, the one who read him bedtime stories and helped with homework, who kissed his scraped knees and celebrated his small victories. Marcus had used Tyler as another tool of control, threatening to never let her see the boy again if she left. Knowing that her love for this child who wasn't hers by blood, but had become hers by choice, was perhaps stronger than her instinct for self-preservation. Listening to her story that night, I felt a mixture of rage at Marcus for what he had done, profound sadness for the pain Sarah had endured, and deep admiration for her strength in finally breaking free. I promised her that night that I would never be that kind of man, that our relationship would be built on respect and trust and genuine care for each other's well-being. She smiled through her tears and said she believed me, that she could see in my actions the truth of my words, that being with me was helping her remember who she had been before Marcus tried to erase her. The months that followed were beautiful and challenging in equal measure as we navigated the complexities of building a relationship, while Sarah continued to heal from her past trauma. There were triggers I learned to recognize, certain tones of voice that would make her flinch, specific situations that would bring back memories she was trying to process. We started going to couples therapy not because our relationship was in trouble, but because we wanted to build the strongest foundation possible, to learn healthy communication patterns that neither of us had seen modeled in our own families growing up. Sarah flourished in our relationship, her confidence growing day by day as she remembered her own worth, as she relearned that love didn't have to hurt, that disagreements could be resolved without raised voices or cruel words. She started painting again, something Marcus had mocked her for, filling our apartment with canvases that captured emotions in bold strokes and subtle shades. Her work at the design firm improved too, earning her a promotion and the respect of colleagues who had watched her transformation with quiet admiration. For my part, I found in Sarah a partner who challenged me to be better, who saw through my tendency to intellectualize emotions and helped me learn to feel them instead, who made me laugh with her terrible puns and moved me to tears with her vulnerability. We traveled together, exploring national parks and small towns, creating new memories to layer over the painful ones from her past. We talked about the future, about maybe getting married someday, about the possibility of children, about growing old together in a house with a garden where she could plant flowers, and I could finally have the library I had always dreamed of. The first sign of trouble came about 18 months into our relationship, though I didn't recognize it as such at the time. Sarah mentioned casually over breakfast that Marcus had reached out, that he wanted to talk about Tyler, that the boy had been asking about her. My immediate instinct was protective, worried about what contact with her abuser might do to her healing process. But Sarah assured me it was just about Tyler, that she wouldn't engage with Marcus beyond what was necessary to potentially see the child she still thought of as a son. I supported her decision to respond, understanding how much she missed Tyler, how the forced separation from him had been one of the most painful aspects of leaving Marcus. We agreed on boundaries, that she would only communicate about Tyler, that any meetings would be in public places, that she would share with me any messages that felt inappropriate or threatening. It seemed reasonable at the time, a mature way to handle a complicated situation, a chance for Sarah to maintain a connection with a child she loved while protecting herself from further harm. For 4 months, there was no contact after that initial exchange. Marcus had apparently decided that allowing Sarah back into Tyler's life wasn't worth whatever game he had been playing. Sarah grieved this loss anew, spending several nights crying for the boy who had called her mom, who had trusted her to always be there, who probably didn't understand why she had disappeared from his life so suddenly. Held her through these nights, wishing I could fix this pain, but knowing that some wounds can only be witnessed, not healed by another person's love. Then the harassment began, starting with late-night calls from blocked numbers, hang-ups that left Sarah shaking with remembered fear. Text messages followed, cruel jokes and videos designed to hurt, to remind her of her supposed worthlessness, to chip away at the confidence she had worked so hard to rebuild. The worst were the messages about Tyler, how the boy hated her now, how Marcus had told him the truth about what kind of person she really was, how he was better off without her negative influence in his life. I wanted to go to the police, to get a restraining order, to do something to protect Sarah from this renewed assault, but she begged me to let her handle it her way. She was afraid that legal action would only escalate things, that Marcus might retaliate in ways we couldn't predict, that any chance of ever seeing Tyler again would be destroyed forever. So we changed her phone number, tightened our social media privacy settings, and tried to move forward as if Marcus didn't exist, as if his poison couldn't reach us in the life we were building together. For a while it worked. The harassment stopped, and we settled back into our rhythm, planning a trip to Portugal for our second anniversary, talking about moving to a bigger apartment, maybe one with a small outdoor space where Sarah could have a garden. She was painting more than ever, preparing for her first solo show at a local gallery, her confidence as an artist finally matching her talent. I was working on a book about lesser-known women in American history, spending my evenings researching and writing while Sarah painted in the corner of our living room we had converted into her studio. Then came the night that changed everything. A Tuesday evening that started like any other, but ended with the beginning of the end of us. Sarah was in the shower and asked me to check her phone for a text from her sister about plans for the weekend. When I picked up her phone, I saw a notification from a messaging app we didn't usually use, and the preview showed Marcus's name. My heart sank as I opened the conversation, not because I was suspicious of Sarah, but because I was worried about what he might be saying to her, what new cruelties he might be inflicting. What I found was worse than harassment or threats. It was a conversation that had been going on for months, hidden from me, friendly in tone as if Marcus was just an old friend catching up, as if the years of abuse had been erased or forgiven. They discussed Tyler, yes, but also their daily lives, sharing memes and jokes, talking about movies and music, engaging in the kind of casual conversation you might have with someone you actually liked, someone who hadn't systematically destroyed your sense of self for 3 years. The room spun as I scrolled through months of messages, my mind trying to reconcile what I was reading with what I knew of their history, with what Sarah had told me about her fear of him, her trauma, her hard-won freedom. There were photos of Tyler that Marcus had sent, updates on his school progress and soccer games, which I could understand Sarah wanting to see. But there were also long conversations about nothing, the kind of rambling exchanges that suggested comfort, familiarity, even affection. When Sarah came out of the shower, she found me sitting on the bed with her phone in my hand, and she knew immediately what I had discovered. The color drained from her face as she wrapped her bathrobe tighter around herself, as if it could protect her from the conversation we were about to have. She didn't try to take the phone or deny what I had seen. She just stood there, water still dripping from her hair, looking smaller and more fragile than I had ever seen her. The conversation that followed was one of the most difficult of my life, filled with tears and accusations, explanations that didn't quite explain anything, and the sound of trust cracking like ice under too much weight. Sarah tried to make me understand that Marcus had changed, that therapy and medication had helped him, that he was genuinely sorry for how he had treated her. She said she hadn't told me because she knew I would worry, that I wouldn't understand how she could forgive someone who had hurt her so badly, that she didn't fully understand it herself. What hurt most wasn't that she had forgiven him, if that's truly what this was. It was that she had hidden it from me, conducting this secret friendship while I continued to see him as the monster who had terrorized her, while I held her through nightmares about him, while we built our life together on what I thought was a foundation of complete honesty. She had let me believe one version of reality while living in another, and that deception cut deeper than any argument we had ever had. I asked her directly if there was more to it than friendship, if she had feelings for Marcus despite everything he had put her through. She swore there wasn't, that it was only about maintaining some connection to Tyler, about believing people could change, about not carrying hatred in her heart because it was too heavy. But as I continued reading their messages, I found something that made my blood run cold. She had told him about a work trip I had taken with my former boss and her wife, spinning it into something suspicious, suggesting that I might have been unfaithful. This was news to me, this accusation she had never voiced in our relationship, but had freely shared with her abusive ex. The work trip in question had been completely innocent, helping my former boss and her wife move some furniture to their new house because they had helped me so much when I first started teaching. I had sent Sarah photos throughout the day, kept her updated on everything, even brought her back her favorite cookies from a bakery near their house. Yet apparently she had harbored suspicions she never voiced to me, choosing instead to confide in Marcus. In the messages, Marcus had responded to her suspicions with rage, saying he would beat me up if he still lived in town, describing in detail the violence he wanted to inflict on me for supposedly betraying Sarah. He ranted about punching holes in his walls just thinking about it, and instead of being alarmed by this violent reaction, Sarah had simply moved the conversation along, neither condemning his threats nor defending me, just accepting his rage as a normal response to her unfounded suspicions. I sat on our bed, in the room where we had made love that very morning, where we had whispered promises and shared dreams, and I felt like I was looking at a stranger. This wasn't the Sarah I knew, the woman who had taught me to see beauty in abstract art, who laughed at my terrible history jokes, who had slowly learned to trust again after years of abuse. This was someone who could smile at me over breakfast while maintaining a secret connection to someone who wanted to hurt me, someone who could share our private doubts and fears with the very person who had once been her greatest fear. The next few days were a blur of arguments and tears, of Sarah trying to explain and me trying to understand. She showed me every message, gave me complete access to her phone and computer, trying to prove that there was nothing romantic or inappropriate beyond the friendship itself. She insisted that she needed someone to vent to about life's frustrations, and apparently I wasn't good enough for that role, despite being her partner, despite being the person who had helped her rebuild after Marcus tore her down. Those words stung perhaps more than anything else, the idea that I had somehow failed as a partner, that she couldn't confide in me about her fears and frustrations, that she needed to turn to the person who had hurt her most for the emotional support I thought I was providing. It made me question everything about our relationship, every moment of apparent closeness, every whispered confession in the dark, every promise we had made about being each other's safe harbor in life's storms. I gave her an ultimatum, something I had never wanted to do but felt was necessary for both our sakes. Either she would cut Marcus off completely and we would go to intensive couples therapy to work through this betrayal and rebuild our trust, or she could continue talking to him and I would leave the relationship for good. Even as I said the words, part of me couldn't believe it had come to this, that we were having this conversation about her maintaining contact with her abuser, that I was having to compete with a ghost from her past who had somehow become present again. I left the apartment to give her time to think, staying with a friend while she made her decision. Part of me was certain she would choose us, choose the life we had built together, choose healing over history. Another part of me, a smaller but persistent voice, wondered if I even wanted her to choose me, if it was truly a difficult choice, if cutting off her abuser required days of deliberation. Shouldn't the answer be obvious? Shouldn't our love, our plans, our future together outweigh whatever twisted connection she maintained with Marcus? A few hours later, she came to me with her answer, and it shattered what was left of my heart. She said she had thought long and hard about it, and she refused to cut Marcus off. Her only chance of ever seeing Tyler again, of being part of his life in any capacity, was by maintaining this relationship with his father. She said that her connection to Tyler, a child who wasn't even biologically hers, mattered more than our relationship, more than the future we had planned together, more than the love I thought we shared. I remember the surreal quality of that moment, standing in my friend's living room as Sarah explained why she was choosing her abuser and his child over me, over us. She cried as she spoke, saying she didn't expect me to understand, that she knew it seemed crazy from the outside, but that maternal love, even for a child who wasn't technically hers, was something she couldn't just turn off. She had raised Tyler for 3 years, been the only stable maternal figure in his life, and the thought of never seeing him again was unbearable. I wanted to, but I couldn't. The drive, I packed, her pain, I called, they were, her mother, the norm, they invite, her parent, the dinner, seeing that they said, so I told them about the ultimatum I had given, not proud of it, but not ashamed either, and about her choice to refuse therapy and refuse to cut contact with Marcus. I insisted that they needed to get her professional help, that this pattern of returning to an abuser, of choosing trauma over healing, would destroy her future relationships too if it wasn't addressed. Throughout my explanation, they listened without interrupting, her mother occasionally dabbing at her eyes with a tissue, her father's jaw tightening with each new revelation. Their response surprised me, though perhaps it shouldn't have. They apologized to me for Sarah's actions, said they were disappointed in the choices she had made, but that they supported my decision to walk away. There was no pressure to reconsider, no suggestion that I should try again, no implication that I was giving up too easily. Instead, there was a weary acceptance, as if this wasn't entirely unexpected, as if they had feared something like this might happen. Her father looked more dejected than I had ever seen him. This strong man who had survived war and built a successful business from nothing, now confronted with his daughter's self-destructive choices. Her mother reached across the table to squeeze my hand, telling me I deserved better, that I deserved someone who could fully commit to building a life together, who could leave the past in the past where it belonged. We sat in silence for a moment before her father ordered a round of shots, something completely out of character for our usually wine-with-dinner relationship. One round became two as the walls came down and we talked more freely, sharing our fears for Sarah, our frustration with her choices, our memories of happier times. We laughed through our tears, remembering the time Sarah had tried to cook Thanksgiving dinner and nearly burned down their kitchen, the way she lit up when talking about her art, the joy on her face when I had surprised her with a weekend trip for her birthday. 3 hours passed in what felt like minutes, the restaurant emptying around us as we processed the end of something we had all believed in. As we prepared to leave, her father did something that shocked me. He hugged me, really hugged me, not the brief back-patting embrace men often share, but a real hug that conveyed all the things he couldn't put into words. Her mother joined in, and for a moment we stood there in the parking lot, 3 people grieving the same loss from different angles. They told me to take care of myself, to eat properly, to avoid sinking into alcohol or other destructive coping mechanisms. They said they would look into therapy options for Sarah, though they weren't optimistic about her accepting help. They handed me a bag with my tools and a bottle of wine I recognized as one of her father's special bottles, saved for important occasions. This felt like the most important and saddest occasion of all, the formal end of my place in their family. Driving home that night, I felt a strange mixture of closure and grief. The conversation with her parents had helped me understand that Sarah's choice wasn't really about me, wasn't a reflection of my worth as a partner or my ability to love and support someone. It was about her own unresolved trauma, her inability to fully break free from the cycle of abuse, her misguided hope that maintaining contact with Marcus would somehow give her access to Tyler again. The months that followed were some of the hardest of my life as I tried to rebuild myself after the relationship I had thought would last forever. I threw myself into my work, finishing my book and starting research for another. I went to therapy, working through not just the end of the relationship but my own patterns and choices, understanding why I had stayed even after the first red flags appeared, why I had believed love could overcome such fundamental breaches of trust. I moved to a new apartment, unable to stay in the space where Sarah's paintings still haunted the walls, where every corner held a memory of better times. I started running again, something I had let slide during the comfortable years of our relationship, finding solace in the rhythm of feet on pavement, the burn in my lungs, the simple clarity of putting one foot in front of the other. Day by day, I began to remember who I was outside of being Sarah's partner, began to rediscover interests and friendships I had let atrophy. Then Sarah started trying to contact me, and any peace I had found evaporated like morning mist. She called from different numbers when she realized I had blocked her original one, left voicemails that swung between apologizing and accusing, between begging for another chance and blaming me for giving up on us. She sent emails that I deleted unread, showed up at my workplace until security escorted her out, tried to reach me through mutual friends who kindly but firmly told her to respect my boundaries. The escalation came when Marcus once again did what I had predicted he would do. He ghosted her completely, blocking her on everything, cutting off even the illusion of access to Tyler. Whatever game he had been playing, whatever manipulation he had been orchestrating, he had achieved his goal of disrupting her life and proving he still had power over her. With him gone again, Sarah's attempts to win me back intensified, as if I were a consolation prize she could claim after losing what she really wanted. She started showing up at places she knew I frequented, always maintaining enough distance to claim coincidence but close enough that I couldn't ignore her presence. The coffee shop where we first met, the bookstore where I did readings, the running path I used every morning, she haunted them all like a ghost of our former happiness. I would catch glimpses of auburn hair disappearing around corners, feel eyes on me in crowded restaurants, find flowers on my doorstep with no note but knowing exactly who they were from. The stalking, because that's what it had become, took a darker turn when I started receiving messages from unknown numbers with details only Sarah would know, references to private jokes we had shared, intimate moments that should have remained sacred between us. She would describe what I was wearing that day, where I had gone for lunch, who I had spoken to, making it clear that she was watching me even when I couldn't see her. The woman who had once made me feel safe and loved now made me feel hunted and exposed. One night, I came home from dinner with friends to find a note slipped under my door, pages of Sarah's handwriting that I recognized from years of birthday cards and grocery lists. It was a rambling, incoherent message that veered between professing her love and airing grievances, between taking responsibility for her choices and blaming me for not understanding, between promising to get help and threatening that she would never let me go. It was the writing of someone coming apart at the seams, and it frightened me more than any of Marcus's secondhand threats ever had. I immediately contacted the police and filed a report, providing them with evidence of the harassment, the unwanted contact, the stalking behaviors that had made me feel unsafe in my own life. They took it seriously, especially given her history as both a victim and now perpetrator of harmful relationship patterns. An investigation was opened, and I was told to document everything, save every message, photograph every unwanted gift or sign of her presence, build a case that could lead to legal intervention if necessary. The authorities were thorough, interviewing witnesses who had seen her lurking around my building, reviewing security footage from various locations, building a pattern of behavior that crossed the line from persistent to dangerous. They assured me they would take appropriate action, that stalking was a serious crime, that I had the right to feel safe and move on with my life without constant fear of encountering my ex. Despite the legal intervention, Sarah's behavior only grew more frantic. She started contacting my family and friends, not directly threatening but trying to manipulate them into facilitating contact with me. She would call them crying, saying she just needed closure, just needed 5 minutes to explain, just needed them to pass along one message. To their credit, everyone maintained firm boundaries, refusing to be drawn into her web of manipulation, recognizing the unhealthy dynamics at play. The turning point came when Sarah's behavior became so invasive that it triggered a full intervention. The security firm I had consulted gathered enough evidence of her stalking to present a comprehensive case. She was served with a restraining order and given a clear choice: cease all contact immediately and get professional help, or face criminal charges that could result in jail time. The law was clear, and the evidence was overwhelming. She had crossed too many lines, violated too many boundaries, turned from victim to perpetrator in a cycle as old as human relationships. Faced with real consequences for the first time, Sarah finally seemed to grasp the severity of her actions. Her parents, who had been trying unsuccessfully to get her into therapy, used this crisis as leverage to insist she get help. The restraining order became the wake-up call she needed, the external boundary that forced her to confront her own behavior when internal boundaries had failed. She agreed to intensive therapy, to medication evaluation, to addressing the trauma that had led her to this point. In a decision that brought me tremendous relief, Sarah chose to leave Denver entirely. The moving company that contacted me by mistake confirmed she was relocating to the East Coast, putting physical distance between us that the restraining order had only legally mandated. Her departure felt like the final chapter closing, the definitive end to a story that had dragged on far too long. The coffee shop could just be a coffee shop again. The running path could just be for running. My life could just be mine. As time passed and the immediate fear subsided, I found myself able to reflect on the entire experience with more clarity and less raw emotion. I could see how Sarah's unresolved trauma had led her to recreate familiar patterns, how the abuse she had suffered had warped her understanding of love and relationships, how her desperate attachment to Tyler had made her vulnerable to Marcus's manipulation once again. Understanding didn't excuse her behavior, but it helped me make sense of how someone I had loved could have made such destructive choices. I also reflected on my own role in the situation, not in a self-blaming way, but with the honest assessment that therapy had helped me develop. Had ignored early warning signs, had perhaps been too eager to be the hero in her healing story, had assumed that love and patience could overcome trauma without professional intervention. I had learned hard lessons about boundaries, about the difference between supporting someone and enabling them, about the importance of both partners being equally committed to building a healthy relationship. The experience changed me in profound ways. I became more cautious but not closed off, more aware of red flags but not paranoid, more protective of my peace but not isolated from the possibility of future love. I learned to trust my instincts, to value actions over words, to recognize that someone's past trauma might explain their behavior, but doesn't obligate me to accept treatment that hurts me. I learned that leaving an unhealthy situation isn't giving up, it's choosing yourself, choosing the possibility of something better. My book was published 6 months after Sarah left town, dedicated to the forgotten women of history whose stories deserve to be told. At the launch event, I looked around the room at friends and colleagues who had supported me through the darkest period of my life, and I felt grateful for the community that had caught me when I fell. Her parents sent a congratulatory card, maintaining the connection we had forged that night over Italian food and tears, proving that some relationships can survive even when others cannot. I heard through mutual acquaintances that Sarah was doing better, that therapy and distance had given her the space to finally process her trauma properly, to understand her patterns, to work toward breaking the cycles that had trapped her. I genuinely hoped it was true, that she would find healing and happiness, that she would one day have healthy relationships built on trust and honesty rather than secrecy and manipulation. Forgiveness came slowly, not for her sake but for mine, releasing the anger that had no purpose left to serve. Now, as I sit in my new apartment, surrounded by books and plants and the quiet life I've built from the ashes of what was, I can see the whole story with perspective that only time provides. Love isn't always enough. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is leave, forcing both people to confront their issues separately rather than becoming entangled in each other's dysfunction. Sometimes the person you thought was your happy ending is actually just a chapter, important and transformative but not meant to last forever. I think about the coffee shop where we met, how a spilled laptop bag had led to 3 years of joy and pain, growth and betrayal, love and loss. I think about Sarah's paintings, the beauty she could create when she wasn't destroying herself and others. I think about Tyler, the innocent child caught in adult dysfunction, and hope he has found stability and love somewhere. I think about Marcus, the ghost who haunted our relationship from beginning to end, and feel only pity for someone so damaged they can only find power in damaging others. Mostly, though, I think about the future, about the lessons learned and the wisdom gained, about the person I've become through surviving this experience. I'm dating again, cautiously but optimistically, bringing to new connections the hard-won knowledge of what healthy love looks like and what it doesn't. I know now that trust once broken can sometimes be repaired but sometimes shouldn't be, that forgiveness doesn't require reconciliation, that loving someone doesn't mean accepting treatment that diminishes you. This story doesn't have a neat ending because life rarely does. Sarah is somewhere on the East Coast, hopefully healing. I'm here in Denver, definitely healing. Marcus is wherever men like Marcus go, probably hurting someone new. Tyler is growing up, and I hope with better examples than what he's seen. Her parents still send Christmas cards, maintaining a thread of connection that speaks to the complexity of human relationships. The coffee shop still serves overpriced lattes. The mountains still stand guard over the city. Life continues. If you're reading this because you see yourself in my story, whether as the person who loves someone struggling with trauma or as someone struggling yourself, know that there is hope on the other side of pain. Know that leaving doesn't make you weak and staying doesn't make you strong, that each situation is unique and requires its own difficult choices. Know that healing isn't linear, that setbacks don't erase progress, that you deserve relationships built on trust and respect and genuine care for each other's well-being. The heart is resilient, capable of breaking and healing, of loving again after loss, of learning from pain without becoming hardened to possibility. We are all walking around with our invisible scars, our stories of love and loss, our lessons learned through tears and time. The trick is not to let those scars define us, not to let past pain prevent future joy, not to let one person's inability to love us properly convince us we are unlovable. In the years since Sarah left Denver, I've thought often about the nature of love and trauma, how they intertwine in ways that can either heal or harm, depending on whether we face them with awareness or denial. I've come to understand that Sarah's return to Marcus, even just through messages, was like an addiction relapse, the familiar pain somehow more comfortable than the uncertain work of healing. The abuse had rewired her brain to seek the very thing that hurt her, to find comfort in chaos because peace felt foreign and frightening. I think about the patterns we all carry, the invisible scripts written in childhood or through early experiences that guide our choices in ways we don't always recognize. Sarah had learned early that love meant pain, that attention came through crisis, that she had to earn affection by enduring treatment no one should accept. Our relationship had challenged those beliefs, had offered her a different model of love, but when stressed, she defaulted to what she knew, like a computer program reverting to its original code. There's a particular kind of loneliness that comes after ending a relationship with someone you still love but can no longer trust. It's not just missing their presence, but missing the future you had planned together, the inside jokes that no longer have an audience, the dreams that dissolved like morning mist. I found myself reaching for my phone to share something funny with Sarah, only to remember she was no longer my person, no longer the safe harbor where I could dock my daily experiences. The healing process has been anything but linear, despite what self-help books might suggest. There were days when I felt strong and clear about my decision, proud of myself for maintaining boundaries and choosing my own well-being. Then there were nights when doubt crept in like fog, whispering that maybe I had been too harsh, too quick to give up, too unwilling to stand by someone who was clearly struggling. The what-ifs could be torture at 3 a.m. when sleep wouldn't come and memories played on repeat. I started writing letters to Sarah that I never sent, pouring out all the things I couldn't say when we were together, all the frustrations and fears and lingering love that had nowhere else to go. These letters became a form of therapy, a way to process emotions that felt too big to contain. I wrote about my anger at her choices, my grief for what we lost, my confusion about how someone could choose their abuser over their partner, my hope that she would someday find the healing that had eluded her with me. Through therapy, I began to recognize my own patterns too, the savior complex that had drawn me to someone who needed healing, the arrogance of thinking I could love someone out of their trauma, the codependency that had developed as I made her recovery my project. To face uncomfortable truths about why I had stayed even after the first betrayal, why I had needed to be needed so badly that I ignored my own needs, why I had been willing to accept less than complete honesty in exchange for feeling like a hero in someone else's story. The work of untangling these patterns has been humbling and necessary. I've had to learn the difference between compassion and enabling, between supporting someone and sacrificing yourself, between loving someone and losing yourself in their chaos. I've had to develop a relationship with myself that doesn't depend on being useful to others, that finds worth beyond what I can do for someone else, that recognizes my own needs as valid and important. Dating again has been its own journey of discovery and growth. The first few attempts were disasters, me either being so guarded that I might as well have been wearing armor, or swinging too far the other direction and oversharing about Sarah within the first hour. I had to learn how to be open without being reckless, cautious without being closed, honest about my past without making it the centerpiece of every conversation. Each new connection taught me something about who I was becoming in the aftermath of heartbreak. There was the lawyer who helped me see that having standards wasn't being picky, it was being wise. The teacher who showed me that vulnerability could coexist with strength. The artist who reminded me that creativity could flourish without chaos. None of these relationships developed into anything serious, but each one helped me recalibrate my understanding of what healthy connection could look like, helped me trust my judgment again after it had been so spectacularly wrong. I often think about Tyler, the innocent child at the center of so much adult dysfunction. By now, he would be approaching his teenage years, carrying who knows what wounds from the chaos of his early childhood. I hope he has found stable figures in his life, teachers or coaches or extended family, who can model what healthy relationships look like. I hope he doesn't blame himself for Sarah's departure from his life, doesn't carry the weight of adult choices he couldn't understand or control. Sometimes I wonder if Sarah ever got to see him again, if Marcus kept his implicit promise of access in exchange for communication, or if he wielded the child like a weapon once more before disappearing. I suspect the latter, knowing what I do about patterns and the people who exploit them. Marcus had found Sarah's weakness and exploited it expertly, dangling the possibility of reunion with Tyler just long enough to destroy her current life before snatching it away again. The cruelty of using a child's love as manipulation still takes my breath away. It speaks to a level of emotional sadism that goes beyond simple abuse into something more calculating and cold. Yet I also understand why it worked, why Sarah fell for it despite knowing better. The love between a parent figure and child, even when not biological, creates bonds that logic cannot break. Her love for Tyler was perhaps the purest thing in her life, and Marcus corrupted even that. I've kept in touch with Sarah's parents, who have become an unexpected source of support and wisdom through this journey. We meet for lunch occasionally, these people who might have been my in-laws in another timeline, and we talk about everything except Sarah at first, until eventually, inevitably, the conversation turns to her. They share what they can without violating her privacy, and I appreciate their delicate balance of maintaining relationships with both of us. From them, I've learned that Sarah did get serious help, entering an intensive outpatient program that addressed not just her trauma, but her patterns of returning to it. She's apparently been diagnosed with complex PTSD, which explains so much about her seemingly irrational choices. The treatment has been difficult but transformative, they say, helping her understand how her nervous system was hijacked by abuse, why she sought the familiar even when it hurt, how to slowly rewire those damaged neural pathways. They tell me she's working now as an art therapist, using her creative gifts to help others process their own trauma. There's something poetically appropriate about this, taking her pain and transforming it into purpose, helping others find healing through the same medium that helped her survive. I'm genuinely glad she found a way to channel her experiences into something meaningful, even as I maintain the boundaries necessary for my own well-being. The city has changed around me in the time since our relationship ended, new buildings rising where old ones stood, favorite restaurants closing and new ones opening, the landscape of my daily life shifting in ways both subtle and profound. Sometimes I walk past the Italian restaurant where her parents and I had our tearful dinner, and I remember the weight of that evening, the strange comfort of grieving with people who understood the loss from different angles. I finished my second book last month, this one about resilience throughout history, about people who faced impossible circumstances and found ways not just to survive, but to thrive. The research felt personal in ways my first book hadn't, each story of overcoming resonating with my own journey. I dedicated it to everyone finding their way back from heartbreak, a broader dedication than my first, but one that felt more honest to who I've become. My apartment now feels like home in a way the old one never quite did, perhaps because I chose everything in it for myself, without compromise or consideration of someone else's preferences. There's a reading chair by the window where I spend Sunday mornings with coffee and newspapers, plants that I've managed to keep alive despite my historically black thumb, art on the walls chosen for what speaks to me rather than what matches a shared aesthetic. I've joined a hiking group that explores the mountains around Denver every weekend, finding in nature the peace that eluded me in the months after the breakup. There's something healing about being small against the vastness of mountains, about the simple clarity of putting one foot in front of the other on a steep trail, about the way physical exertion can quiet mental noise. I've made friends in this group, people who knew me first as Jordan the hiker rather than Jordan the guy getting over a bad breakup. One woman in particular has become a close friend, someone whose own story of survival and growth matches mine in intensity, if not in details. We've spent hours on trails discussing the nature of resilience, the way trauma can become either a prison or a teacher, the choice we face every day to either repeat patterns or break them. She's dating someone new now, and watching her navigate that with wisdom earned through pain gives me hope for my own romantic future. The seasons have cycled through multiple times now, each one bringing its own memories and associations. The first autumn after Sarah left was the hardest, the changing leaves reminding me of her hair, the crisp air carrying echoes of apple-picking trips and pumpkin carving sessions that would never happen again. But each season gets easier, the memories less sharp, the associations more diluted by new experiences layered on top. I've developed rituals that have nothing to do with my past relationship, new traditions that belong only to this version of myself. Tuesday night trivia with colleagues who have become friends. Saturday morning farmers market visits where I buy too many vegetables with ambitious cooking plans. Monthly volunteer shifts at the literacy center, helping adults learn to read and finding purpose in their victories. These routines create a structure that supports me without confining me. The concept of forgiveness has evolved for me throughout this journey. At first, I thought forgiving Sarah meant forgetting what happened, minimizing the hurt, pretending the betrayal didn't matter. Now I understand forgiveness as something I do for myself, releasing the anger that served its purpose but now only weighs me down. I forgive her not because what she did was okay, but because carrying resentment was like drinking poison and expecting her to suffer. I've even found space to forgive myself for the ways I contributed to our dysfunction, for the signs I missed or ignored, for the times I enabled her patterns instead of challenging them. Self-forgiveness might be the hardest kind, requiring us to hold ourselves accountable while also extending the same compassion we would offer a friend. I'm still working on this, still learning to be gentle with my past self who did the best he could with what he knew at the time. Sometimes I imagine parallel universes where things went differently. One where Sarah chose therapy and cutting contact with Marcus, where we worked through the betrayal and came out stronger. Another where I recognized the red flags earlier and left before getting so deeply entangled. Yet another where Marcus never reappeared, where we built our life together without that ghost haunting our happiness. These imaginings used to torture me, but now they're just curious wanderings, acknowledgments of how many factors shape our lives. The truth is, I'm no longer sure that Sarah and I were meant to last forever, even without Marcus's interference. We were perhaps meant to teach each other specific lessons, to catalyze certain growth, to love each other through particular seasons of our lives. Not all relationships are designed for permanence, and that doesn't diminish their importance or the reality of the love shared. We were real, and then we were over, and both things can be true without contradiction. I'm working on my third book now, fiction this time, a departure from my historical work. It's about second chances and the courage to begin again, about characters who find themselves starting over in middle age, discovering that life can surprise you just when you think all the patterns are set. Writing fiction feels vulnerable in new ways, creating rather than researching, imagining rather than documenting. But it also feels like growth, like stretching creative muscles that had atrophied. The dating world continues to be a mix of comedy and possibility. I've had coffee with women who seemed perfect on paper but left me cold in person, shared dinners with others who made me laugh but nothing more. I'm learning to trust the process, to enjoy getting to know people without the pressure of finding the one, to see each date as complete in itself rather than a step toward some predetermined goal. Last month, I met someone who made me remember what butterflies feel like. She's a journalist who covers environmental issues, passionate about her work in a way that lights up her whole face when she talks about it. We've had 3 dates so far, each one leaving me wanting more time, more conversation, more of her particular brand of intelligent humor. It's too early to know what this might become, but I'm allowing myself to be hopeful while staying grounded in reality. She knows about Sarah, the broad strokes anyway, shared during a conversation about past relationships and what we've learned from them. She shared her own story of heartbreak and healing, and I appreciated the equality of that exchange, both of us bringing our histories to the table without letting them dominate the meal. There's something refreshing about dating someone who has also done their work, who understands that we all carry baggage but expects it to be well organized and properly claimed. As I close this chapter of my story, literally and figuratively, I do so with a sense of completion that has nothing to do with finding new love and everything to do with finding myself. The journey from heartbreak to healing has been longer and more complex than I ever imagined, filled with setbacks and surprises, moments of grace and periods of grinding difficulty. But I wouldn't trade it for an easier path because this one has made me who I am today. I'm grateful for the love Sarah and I shared, even knowing how it ended. I'm grateful for the pain that taught me my own strength. I'm grateful for the friends who caught me when I fell, and the therapist who helped me understand why. I'm grateful for her parents who showed me that family can transcend romantic relationships. I'm grateful for the time and distance that transformed acute pain into wisdom, heartbreak into growth, endings into beginnings. Love is still beautiful, even when it ends badly. Trust is still possible, even after betrayal. Happiness is still achievable, even after heartbreak. These are the truths I hold on to as I move forward, as I open myself to new possibilities, as I choose hope over fear, healing over bitterness, growth over stagnation. This is my story, but it doesn't define my future. The best chapters, I believe, are still being written, and I approach them with curiosity rather than certainty, with openness rather than armor, with the hard-won knowledge that I can survive whatever comes next because I've already survived what I thought would destroy me. To anyone reading this who sees their own pain reflected in mine, know that the view from the other side of heartbreak is worth the climb to get here. The journey is not easy, and there are no shortcuts through grief, but there is life after loss, love after betrayal, joy after sorrow. We are more resilient than we know, more capable of growth than we imagine, more deserving of healthy love than our worst experiences might suggest. Keep going. The story isn't over. The best chapters really are still ahead. In sharing this story, I've come to understand that our deepest wounds can become our greatest teachers if we let them. The relationship with Sarah taught me about the complexity of love, how it can coexist with pain, how caring for someone doesn't always mean staying with them, how sometimes the most loving act is to step away and allow both people the space to heal separately. It taught me that trauma bonds can feel like love, but operate on entirely different circuitry, that intensity is not the same as intimacy, that drama is not passion, but often it's counterfeit. I've learned that healing is not a destination but a journey, not a problem to be solved but a process to be honored. There are still days when something triggers a memory, a song we used to dance to, the smell of her favorite perfume on a stranger, a couple holding hands in the way we used to. But these moments no longer devastate me. Instead, they're like touching an old scar, a reminder of pain that has transformed into strength, evidence of survival and growth. The woman I'm dating now, Rebecca, represents not a replacement for what I lost, but an entirely new chapter, written with the wisdom gained from past chapters. We move slowly, both of us carrying our own histories, but not letting them write our future. There's a maturity in how we approach each other, a recognition that love at our age comes with complexities, but also with the self-knowledge to navigate them. We talk openly about our fears and boundaries, create space for each other's continued healing, celebrate the small victories of trust rebuilt and walls carefully lowered. Sometimes I wonder what Sarah would think if she could see me now, see the life I've built from the ashes of what we had. Hope she would be proud, would see that her leaving forced me to grow in ways I never would have if we had stayed together. I hope she's found her own version of peace, her own path to healing, her own story of resilience and recovery. Our paths diverged, but I want to believe they're both leading to better places than where we started. The city of Denver has become truly mine in a way it never was when I was part of a couple. I have my own favorite spots now, places that hold no memories of us, restaurants where I'm known as a regular, parks where I've sat with new friends, bookstores where I've given readings to audiences that know me only as an author, not as someone's ex. The geography of my life has been remapped, and I navigate it with confidence born from having rebuilt everything from scratch. As I finish writing this, snow is beginning to fall outside my window, the first of the season, transforming the familiar landscape into something magical and new. It feels like a metaphor for the transformative power of time and healing, how the same places can look entirely different when covered in fresh snow, how beauty can emerge from the coldest seasons. I watch the flakes fall and think about all the seasons I've weathered, all the storms I've survived, all the quiet moments of beauty I might have missed if I hadn't been forced to slow down and rebuild. Thank you for listening to my story, for being a witness to this journey of heartbreak and healing, of loss and rediscovery. If you're in the midst of your own dark night, know that dawn does come, even if you can't see it yet. Be patient with yourself. Be kind to your heart. Trust that you're stronger than you know, that love will find you again when you're ready, that the best, truly, is yet to come. The story continues, and you are its author. Write it well.